You're listening to the TV Obsessive channel, presented by TVObscast.com.
Hello, welcome back to the TV Obsessive podcast here today for episode 64. As always, I'm Cameron Crane, executive editor for TVObsessive.com, joined by Ryan Kirksey, writer and contributor for the site. How you doing today, Ryan?
Today's good. It feels like about the 98th day of August, but boy, we're ready
Right.
for fall to get here, ready for football to get here, but otherwise doing good.
Well, yeah, it can't be summer all the time
Yeah.
until it is because of global warming. Or it doesn't work that way anyway. Well, yeah, so we're back. It's August 30th. Today we're gonna start digging in a bit on Homicide: Life on the Streets, which if people aren't aware is a show that came out in the 1990s. We're starting with the first few episodes of season one. So I think it was 1993. This has been a show that will hugely critically acclaimed for years and years and years. People will talk about it as one of the best shows, historically significant in the development of television in the 1990s. And you haven't been able to stream it anywhere until I guess a couple of weeks ago. It came to Peacock. So we're gonna talk about the first three episodes in the latter part of the pod. As per usual, spoilers will be on the table there, but I don't know how much it matters with this show. If you haven't seen it, I think you're probably listening to what we have to say. Anyway, I'll give a spoiler warning again before we get into it. But anyhow, before we talk about Homicide, which I'm looking forward to, as per usual, talk a bit about what caught our eye in TV news this week. Where would you like to start, Ryan?
Yeah, what about a couple shows that are going to apparently get more seasons that we didn't think were going to get more seasons? We've talked about one of them, but maybe we'll start with the one we haven't. I think for all intents and purposes, we all thought Yellowstone was going to end with this second half of season 5 that's coming out in November. Kevin Costner left for this last part of this fifth season, but now apparently the two other primary characters that people love are going to come back and star in a sixth season of Yellowstone. I stopped watching Yellowstone after the first season, just sort of wasn't my thing, but I know this is a hugely popular show. There's been all this strife with Kevin Costner. He's gone off to do these westerns and not coming back. But after they thought and communicated that season 5 would be the last one, now there's going to be a sixth season.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have still not watched Yellowstone. I know it's quite popular, and I internally feel like a snob for not having watched it in a way.
Yeah.
It's one of those shows that is really popular, but it feels like the community of TV critics don't talk about. You don't see
Yeah.
A lot of articles and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I haven't checked it out. That is interesting. If as I understand it, Kevin Costner was really, pretty much the lead on the show, right? And they're going to continue without him. It has a little bit of the feel of the last season of House of Cards that I did not watch.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Kevin Costner, I don't think he's in trouble legally, but was not happy
Well, no, yeah,
financially.
right.
Yeah, not happy financially, not happy with the direction of the show. Wanted to go off and make these American Horizon movies that are these sprawling Western stories. So he said, I'm out of here. So he's not going to be here for this last half of season 5, and then not at all for an apparent sixth season. But yeah, there's that does sort of strike a chord with me that House of Cards was not the same after Kevin Costner left.
Kevin Spacey.
Sorry, Kevin Spacey
They're
left.
both Kevin, but one of them is. I was reading about Kevin Spacey, I think this week. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but something like he's refusing to leave the home that's being foreclosed on. He's still his.
Yeah, he's gone off the deep end.
Yeah, he is. And I don't know why you do things like make videos where you're kind of in character as Frank Underwood and you're kind of not. He's done some weird stuff the past few years since the scandal broke and he got in legal trouble and all of that. But anyway, we don't need to focus too much on that. So the other show that you referred to, we hit on before. This would be Ted Lasso. Regular listeners will recall that when this came up before, I kind of poo-pooed it as maybe a nothing burger, as the kids say. But maybe not. We've got some news here that they actually have, like, well, they've at least signed on some of the actors to potentially do it, but it still feels like it's unconfirmed.
Yeah, so this is what's odd to me. Maybe still, I'm still, I don't know, not necessarily convinced. So the actors and actresses that play Rebecca Walton, Roy Kent, Leslie Higgins, sort of the British actors that are represented by the Actors Guild in that country are signed on. They're ready to go. They're willing to do it. And so basically, this piece that we looked at says, well, all we need now is to get Jason Sudeikis and Juno Temple to sign on and get their things ready. I mean, Juno Temple is like a megastar now. Jason Sudeikis has not necessarily come out and said he wants to do this. So, I mean, there's been a lot of buzz now about season 4 happening, but it's not just like, let me just get them to sign on the dotted line there's more to it than that.
Well, right. In the news this week, the article we read in the Hollywood Reporter and so on, is reiterating the important bit from the thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago of saying, well, it's all up to Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah.
Jason Sudeikis wants to do it. Apple TV will make it. And it doesn't seem like there's been movement on that front. You might think that, maybe in some private conversations, they're not willing to make public Jason Sudeikis has said something, but at least in terms of what's going to the press, nothing seems to have moved there. And he needs to be on board because he's the star of the show and the head writer of the show.
I mean, I guess on the glass half full perspective, you could say, well, why would they make the effort and get these British actors signed up, ready to go if there was not some momentum towards it happening? So maybe it is they just want to get these folks on board. I read that the actor who plays Jamie Tart, the very popular soccer player, will not be returning for a potential 4th season. So not everybody's on board, but almost everybody's on board.
Yeah, I don't know, right? I mean, I think Apple TV Plus wants it to happen.
Yeah.
And I think for obvious reasons, it's their most successful show ever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I still don't know how much to read into this, but we are seeing a little bit of movement, as you noted, with actors signing on. So we'll keep an eye on it. If there's news in the future, any kind of official confirmation, or even Jason Sudeikis saying in an interview, I have an idea I want to do. That seems like that'd be enough, but does he? In terms of things that are going to happen, I've known this for a while, but we got a release date for Somebody Somewhere season 3, coming October 27th. I'm a big fan of the show. I've written recaps on the first 2 seasons of the show. I intend to probably write recaps on the 3rd season of the show. We're also finding out that's going to be it. So this nice, beautiful, small, comfy show from the Duplass Brothers Productions is ending with season 3. But we should be thankful that it got 3 seasons. I think season 2 won a Peabody, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. I mean, I guess I had forgotten how much acclaim, particularly season 2, had gotten. Yes, glad you mentioned about the Duplass brothers putting this show together. This is a show I need to watch if I want to feel good about myself, right? I need to, if I need something uplifting, encouraging, this is a show to turn on. If I understand correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all what's an idiom. It's not all roses and sunshine or whatever, but it's like. It is the kind of show that might possibly make you cry tears of joy.
Yeah. Okay.
It's really a nice little show. I think each season's only 6 episodes. So yeah, you should check it out. And I'm saying that not just to Ryan, but to everyone. I mean, I imagine there might be some people who it doesn't land for. I can imagine hypothetical viewers who kind of think this is boring or something. Because it is just sort of about like middle-aged people in Kansas. So take that as you will. But as far as Bridget Everett, who's from Manhattan, Kansas, people aren't familiar with her. She's made quite a name for herself as a performer and actor, but also like stage performer in the other Manhattan and elsewhere. And so what's the phrase they like to use? Somebody somewhere is inspired by her life.
Okay.
It's not based on her life, but inspired by it. I think that's the phrase they like to use. So It is a nice show, kind of a, I don't quite want to say midlife crisis in terms of what that brings to mind, but that something in that sort of vein
Yeah.
of, what are we doing with ourselves? What does one do with ourselves? So there are real stakes, but the stakes are in terms of the character and like things like that, as opposed to it being,
Yeah.
spy missions where someone's going to blow up buildings or something like that. So it's a really nice show.
Good. No, I will have to check that out, particularly as you said, because it's going to come to an end after 3 seasons. What else is going on? We haven't talked about Yellowjackets in a long time. One of our favorite shows, I think. Or you really enjoy Yellowjackets, if I remember correctly, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was an
Okay.
early. I don't know what the word is. I've been on
You
Yellowjacket since the
you may have
beginning.
actually turned me on to that show. I mean, this is, of course, right up my alley now that I've discovered it, but I think I may have heard about it from you. This show feels like its second season ended about 4 years ago. It really was only about, I think, 13, 14 months ago,
Yeah, I
May
was
of
going to say it was like a
2023.
little over a year ago. Mhm.
Yeah, so we are, well, I don't want to say likely, we are hopeful to get a new season sometime in 2025, and that new season is apparently going to feature Joel McHale in some undisclosed role we've learned this week.
Yeah, that's the thing to talk about. We're going to talk about that, but spoiler free way for the most
Yep,
part. I
yep.
think we can be fairly spoiler free. That is a note there, Ryan. We have to avoid certain things, like saying, well, it can't be.
Yeah.
But anyway, the yeah, huge fan of Yellow Jackets. If people, um, don't know, I've written on every episode on TVObscast.com. You can go check that out. I've also written articles on the opening credits, analyzing the opening credits from season one and then season two, and I'll probably do that again with season three because they'll probably be different. I mentioned
Yes.
that in part because I did see a video they put out that had Joel McHale, and I don't know if it's actually from the season three opening credits, but it looked like it, and it had the music and so on. Did you see
Mm.
that?
No, I've not seen that, but that's interesting.
And it's on Instagram. I don't know. I don't know if it's
Okay.
elsewhere. And again, I don't know if it's part of the opening credits or not. It seemed relatively short, but it was kind of. It was like an Instagram post, and it had the video, and Joe McHale was in it, and it's like "Welcome to the Hive" or something like
Okay.
that. But yeah, who might Joel McHale play? Seems to
Oh
me,
boy.
I don't know if you have anything off the top of your head, but I've been thinking about this a little bit. It seems to me that there are two broad possibilities.
Okay.
The first possibility, which is probably the more likely possibility, is that he is playing a completely new character, similar to what Elijah Wood did in season two.
Yes, as I say, there Elijah Wood was brought in season two after not appearing in season one, was a brand new addition to the cast. Yeah.
Seemingly has no connection to the, people don't know who are listening. Again, trying to avoid spoilers, but there are two timelines in the show, 25 years apart, right? One in, I think, 1996, and the other, I guess, is still in 2021.
Yep.
Maybe it's 2022 by now. I think maybe it has moved to 97, 2022.
Yes.
But anyway, they're
Yes.
25 years apart. So, of course, there's a question you could consider of, is there any chance that Joel McHale is playing a character that we are familiar with from the 1990s timeline in the present timeline? And there's really only one possibility, right?
Yes. Yes. I think I know where you're going.
How much do I have to avoid
If
spoilers?
you're going to go there,
Is
be
it a
careful.
spoiler to say the man's name? I'll just say the actor's name. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
How about that? How about that? So this is what I was looking up because my first reaction was, well, I don't think that Joe McHale is sufficiently older than Steven Kruger. These are the actors involved.
Hmm.
He's 18 years older.
Okay. Okay.
I would posit to you that is within the realm of fudgeability.
You can make that work, huh?
Right. He's now 25 years older, right? No way is he 25 years older. No. But Stephen Kruger was born in 1989. Joel McHale was born in 1971. I realize he's quite that old, but he is 18 years older. So
Yeah,
Maybe.
I can see that. I mean, just going through my mental Rolodex of this particular character. We're gonna have to do an episode on Yellowjackets when it comes back, just to go through all this stuff. But
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
I can see what you're putting out there.
I think it's possible. And there isn't really anyone else who is a live possibility that you could speculate about. Um, again, I do think in all likelihood he's probably just a new character, probably.
Yeah.
So um we'll see. Also on the Yellow Jackets front, still wondering if we're gonna get that secret episode in between
Yeah.
seasons, which
They're still working on it. They're still editing it.
kind of seemed to be confirmed on social media by Ashley Lyle. So,
Use it as a way to announce the third season. I mean, just give us something. I don't know why it feels like it's been forever since I've seen that show, but yeah, it's been a little more than a year.
well, I think part of it maybe is that they did move from season one to season two pretty quickly.
They did, I think, within a year.
And
Yep.
I think they wanted to do the same thing with season three. And then we had the strikes and
Mhm.
production delays and all of that. So I know they're working on it. And yeah, we'll have an eye out for an announcement of when we might get season three. I'm guessing it will be 2025.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
That's the
means
speculation here in this piece. So yeah,
like,
most likely that will be the case.
are Yellow Jackets and Severance going to be out at the same time again? That happened with season one of both shows.
Oh boy.
And it was kind of great because I
Yeah,
love both shows, but I was writing on both shows, and it's like
yeah, that would be tough.
you can spread this out for me a little bit, world. I don't even have like my two favorite shows on at the same time.
Right.
Anyhow, definitely looking forward to that. Another thing that we're looking forward to is the bear. Notes I just put because we'd read previously that these reports that they'd filmed season three and season four concurrently, and now in an interview, Jeremy Allen White said maybe we'll start filming season four in March or something. I don't know.
Yeah. This is just baffling to me because, I mean, again, not to give away anything about season three, not to give away about how season three ended, but there was speculation and even reporting that yes, these seasons were filmed back to back. We knew we were going to do 4 seasons. The characters on the show have become so popular, so in demand. We're just going to take the time we have with them and just go back to back. Now, particularly because of I guess the narrative of that third season to say, no, we haven't even started filming it, and it may not even begin filming until 2025. Can they get that done in time to have another June release? What happened to the end of season three? Yeah, this I agreed with your just sort of what kind of what are we dealing with here? Because this is not at all what we've heard before.
Yeah, I'm really kind of confused. And we went to that virtual press event before season two came out, and someone asked about that story that they'd filmed season three and season four back to back at the same time, or however you want to put that. And as I recall, the answer was something like, "You'll see," wink, wink.
Yeah.
So then watching season three, I thought, oh well, yeah, they did, and it's like one season they cut in half.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I don't know. But presumably we'll find out more as we move forward. And
I mean, here's one thing I do know, based on what happened at San Diego Comic-Con, we were told that weekend, so this is what, late July, early August, that Fantastic Four was going to start filming that next week. Evan Moss-Bachrach is one of the 4 stars of that movie. That's going to take 6 to 8 months to film. So it's at least going to wait on him to finish before they can pick back up again. So yeah, that's probably all right. As soon as you're done over there in London shooting this, we're going to come back to the bear. But yeah, just surprising news. I thought it was already in the in the can.
yeah, me too. But maybe they did some of it. Maybe they even did most of it, and they didn't do
Yeah.
all of it. Who knows, right? Like that could make sense if it's like maybe they shot all the scenes that occur in the restaurant, right?
Yeah,
Because they've already
yeah.
got the set going and they do those shots at once and things like that. But then there's some other stuff that happens elsewhere that they still need to film. Who knows? Anyway, I just saw this. I was what? I'm kind of confused now. But it'll work out. I do, until we hear more, have relative confidence that they'll keep it on the schedule of a June release. But
Yeah, I think they filmed season 3 in a January, February timeframe, and then it was ready for June. So presumably they'll make it work.
yeah, hopefully. Coming to Netflix, I just saw this announced, and I don't know what you think about this. For some reason, I am intrigued by a documentary coming to Netflix on September 25th about Vince McMahon. Apparently, it's like from the producers of Tiger King. I don't know. Thoughts about this?
I guess I'm more curious as to why we're giving this much airtime to, I guess, somebody who's pretty despicable. But then I looked into it more, I found, oh, this is a sort of 4-year endeavor that they have started following this guy, looking at his career. And so, those that may not be familiar, I think it was in early 2024, he resigned from the WWE because of some sexual misconduct allegations. But apparently this has been going on long before that came out. So, I mean, this is, I mean, say what you will about wrestling and its connection to sports. This is one of the most influential sports figures of the last 40 years, clearly. So it's no surprise that this is happening.
Yeah. And I mean, by no means does the documentary sound like it's going to be a celebration of Vince McMahon,
Right.
It really seems like it might be, kind of salacious. The Tiger King reference also kind of got me a little bit intrigued on this one. I don't know for sure that I'll watch it, but I might. I'm interested potentially. And
they say, quote, "We want to pull back the curtain and reveal the true Vince McMahon." I mean, he's been except for what we came out, I guess he's been a pretty open book about a lot of things.
Right. So, like, what are we going to learn is what I was about
exactly.
to say, right? Like, I feel like I kind of already know, and maybe I'll check it out, and whether I watch all of it will depend on whether I feel like it's fulfilling that promise that you just referred to. Like, is this giving me stuff that I did not know in a meaningful way, or framing it in a way that's interesting?
That's one thing we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I did finish it. The Pete Rose documentary that came out on Max. That's one thing I thought it did well. It did not hold things back when they were trying to approach the type of person that he was, and it revealed a lot of new things that I, even a huge baseball fan, did not know. So they can approach it sort of in that direction. Yeah, I think it'll be well done.
Well, yeah, so maybe check that out. No, one more thing that I put on our notes, I think it's the last thing. Zach Braff wants to do a Scrubs reboot, and it seems like there are interest from the other parties as well, and that there is a decent chance that we may in fact get a Scrubs reboot. They clearly don't want to do a movie. They don't want to do a movie.
Yeah.
It would be more Scrubs. You ever watch Scrubs?
I've caught Scrubs. I mean, Scrubs is one of those shows you can just turn on and you can. I certainly cannot say that I have watched it from beginning to end, but I've probably caught half the episodes over, just over time since it went off the air. My question for you is, I was trying to think of examples of reboots and things we've seen recently. This show ended in 2010. What is the statute of limitations on how long you have to wait before you can reboot a show? Is 15 years long enough?
How long do you have to wait before you can do it? Yeah, I think 15 years is long enough.
Okay.
I might say that, I think it should be at least 10 years probably before you, if it's like I guess what I would say is, if it's shorter than that, it would start to feel like it's just been picked up again after a hiatus.
Right, exactly.
So like if they made a new season of Hannibal, right now, this year, I don't know that I would say they're rebooting Hannibal so much as, finally got it's been a while. I don't
finally
know,
got another one,
9-10 years or something almost, I think, but I don't know. Michael Suarez wrote something on Scrubs, as it happens, for TV Obsessive pretty recently this summer, looking back at it. So I'm sure that he'd probably be on board for the Scrubs reboot. I also can tie one more thing into this. It's like I'm very, I don't know if I want to say pretentious or what. Like, I hate commercials. And generally speaking, people are like, well, I not only want to watch the Super Bowl, I want to see the commercials. I look down my nose at the idea of enjoying commercials. Take that as you will, come at me if you want. But one recent commercial I've enjoyed actually is the T-Mobile Scrubs guys commercial with Jason Momoa. You know the one that?
Oh, I've seen that one plenty of times. Yeah, if you've watched any live sports, you've seen that commercial. Yeah.
I'm not sick of it yet.
Nope.
I'm still finding it kind of enjoyable. There's singing this stupid song about Wi-Fi. So,
They'll probably be back for the Super Bowl. I bet they're back.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, I guess maybe part of that is me thinking maybe a Scrubs reboot could fly.
Yeah.
The vibes of those guys might still work
Yeah.
in 2024, 2025. So we'll see. Um, what else? So I was going to mention Sunny on Apple TV Plus. Been watching the show. I've been writing on this week to week. Season finale is this coming Wednesday. Did
Okay.
you ever check this out at all?
I haven't.
It's it's a mixed bag. I mean, I've
Yeah.
enjoyed watching it some weeks more than others. I've enjoyed it overall. I kind of enjoyed this past week's episode more than previous ones. It was a little bit weird, which is kind of up
Yeah.
my alley. So I'm curious to see how the season ends. And then I don't know if there are plans to make more beyond that, right? So one thing
Yeah.
I'm asking myself, as you often do when you're approaching the season finale, is how much closure are we going to get? How much is going to be left open? But broadly speaking, I've been enjoying it.
Yeah. I would say I think we've talked about Sunny 2 or 3 times, and it seems like every time we do your review of it is more and more mixed, and maybe that hasn't changed as we approach the finale.
It's an odd show
Mhm.
in like, so it's set in Japan, but our lead, played by Rashida Jones, is an American who moved to Japan years in the past by the time the show was happening. And her husband has apparently died in a plane crash. Sorry, not a spoiler. This is like the beginning of episode 1. Okay, just literally the setup. But there's a question about. I mean, it's still kind of a question in my mind of whether he really did, and so on. So there's a mystery along those lines. But he leaves her this robot named Sunny.
Okay.
And then like the Yakuza are involved.
Yeah.
And homebots are all over the place. So it's not our world. It's kind of a near future or alternate world where everyone has homebots.
Yeah.
But then Sunny seems to be a special, more sophisticated, perhaps has free will for real, as opposed to
Okay.
I don't know. So there's still kind of a lot of questions heading into the season finale, and anyway,
Yeah.
I guess I would recommend it, but not strongly necessarily, right? So kind of
Understood.
along the lines of if the things I was just saying sound interesting,
Yeah.
Maybe check this one out.
Well, in the vein of things that I'm not sure I can recommend, I have started to check out this new season of Rings of Power. Amazon has dropped the first 3 episodes. This, of course, comes on the heel of 2 summers ago when Rings of Power and not Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon went head to head in the late summer of 2022. Now it's got its sort of this fantasy slot to itself. And I just have to say the vibes are not good here.
No.
This was, I think, got the first season, despite costing like $500 million, got very mixed reviews. This is new content that these creators and writers are building on top of little excerpts and pieces of books and things that exist in the Tolkien verse. It's the writers have said that they've got a 5-season plan. I'm not confident they make it through 3, frankly.
Oh,
It's got some things that it's struggling through. So
it's just like
anyway, all that to say, it's complex. It's like Game of Thrones, that it's complex, multiple locations, multiple characters, a lot to do, a lot to figure out. But it's hard to tie the things together right now. So I'll give it this whole season. But I'm not sure that I will have the option to have a 3rd season if I'm just play the prediction game.
Is it going to depend on how much of a Tolkien fan Jeff Bezos is?
Yeah, that's right. How much does he
Does
care about the story of the rings? Yeah,
does
exactly.
Bezos
Yeah.
like the show?
It's like, how much money does he care to lose on this? I mean, the viewership numbers on this were good the first season. There's not many things come out for the second season, but I don't know how it can justify again $500 million on what they're spending on this show.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, certainly Amazon has the money,
Yeah,
but there should be a business logic at play, and we never know. They're still making the Wheel of Time, also, aren't they? Speaking of
I think
fantasy
so.
series, does
Yeah,
anyone watch that show?
that, I have no idea. They went heavy on sort of lore science fiction. They are apparently going to do a dragon show. They've bought some property that has to do, and they're going to pursue that. So I don't know. They just have not figured out the formula yet.
You know what someone should do is a Dragonlance show
Okay.
based on the books by oh man, what were their names now? Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, I think. You ever read Dragonlance novels?
No, no, no.
Anyway, they're like pulling on something from 30 years ago when my teenage self was reading Dragonlance novels. But some of them are really good. Some of them, I mean, like that's directly tied in with Dungeons and Dragons. You know how
Yes,
there's
okay.
like Dungeons and Dragons books. They aren't all good, but there are a lot of Dungeons and Dragons books.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was thinking about that recently for some reason. I was thinking about the wizard in that story, whose name I can't remember. That's what I was wondering. Anyway,
We'll see.
I've
We'll
been a
see.
fan of fantasy, and there's a lot of stuff out there, and I feel like Game of Thrones did show us that the right way to do it potentially is with an extended TV series as opposed to a standalone film.
Yep.
The
Yep.
standalone, like, it's very hard for me to think of a standalone film that is in that kind of genre of fantasy. I mean, like Wizards and Dragons fantasy,
Yeah.
that is actually good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ones that I like, even though they're not very good. But I don't know.
Yeah. You if you're going to do that, you need 9.5 hours across 3 movies like the Lord of the Rings trilogy
Oh
to
yeah,
tell it.
Lord of the Rings. Actually, yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies,
Mhm.
Peter Jackson. That's the first touchstone,
Yeah.
as opposed to Game of Thrones. But I mean, what they did with those movies was 3 movies that are over 3 hours long.
Yeah.
So you know, you get it. I actually do appreciate, not to go on too much of a tangent, but in the first Lord of the Rings movie, how they just did an exposition dump. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you can't spend too much time world building. Just exposition dump. Let's get going. It was a good plan. It's a good plan.
Yeah.
And then I never watched the Hobbit movies because
Nor did I.
it became 3 movies.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No.
I don't know.
I'll report back at the end of the season, but not the best start in my humble opinion.
Interesting. Yeah, well, definitely. I'm not watching it, but I will be interested to learn if it ends up getting canceled. I mean, that would be kind of
Yeah.
scandalous. And they put so
Yeah.
much money into the show.
So much. I mean, it would be devastating to the Amazon Prime Video brand if that happened.
Right. So they might just keep making it anyway.
Yeah.
You know. Anyhow, good. So let's get to Homicide: Life on the Street. It's going to be our topic for the latter part of the podcast today. As per usual, spoilers on the table. Here it would be for the first 3 episodes of Homicide: Life on the Street. First 3 episodes of season 1, first 3 episodes of the series. So if you're worried about that, this is your warning that we are going to feel free to talk about what happens in those 3 episodes. As I said, towards the top of the podcast, I don't know how much I would feel like it matters here. We're going to be talking about the show in general a bit. There are murders in the show.
Yeah. It's a homicide procedural show. I mean, what do you want?
Someone lights a candle. I mean, they also like, I don't know how worried I think you should be about spoilers, but if you are really worried about spoilers, those will be on the table on the other side of this brief musical interlude, and we'll pick up talking about Homicide: Life on the Street.
Okay, we are back. We're going to talk about the first 3 episodes of the first season of Homicide: Life on the Street. This show was created in 1993 by Paul Atanasio, based off of a book, Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets by David Simon. Perhaps you know that name from various other projects. Again, this show was given the pilot was given the post Super Bowl spot on January 31st, 1993. The first season consists of 9 episodes. The first season, particularly the first 3 episodes, follows a group of detectives working in Baltimore Police Department's Homicide Division. This veteran group of detectives and their captain welcome a rookie homicide detective named Tim Bayless to the squad. They give him a high-profile murder case, a little girl named Adina Watson. This is his first job, and he is tasked with trying to solve it. Other cases throughout these episodes appear from time to time, including a cold case about a woman run over by a car, wife murdering her husband to collect insurance, an elderly woman who is not happy in her marriage and does nothing to stop her husband from dying a couple of times. So again, this is a homicide procedural show that has some cases that come and go throughout the episodes, and then one that seemingly is going to span most of the first season, this case of Adina Watson. Again, a show that ran from 1993 to 1999. How did you view it? How did you find it compared to the 2024 TV landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really interesting. So start with some thoughts about the structure and the pacing of the show, how it feels, knowing that it's from 1993. I immediately started to see why people point to this as significant in the history of television. You know, I'm old enough to remember 1993, even if I was only 12 or 13 years old when this premiered. And I didn't watch it at the time. You didn't either, as I understand it. But you know, we can remember the 90s, even if we were primarily, you know, teenagers, and what TV was like, you know. And the pacing, I think, first of all, is very, I guess I'll just say modern. You know, it didn't feel like, you go back to some things, even things that I quite enjoy, you know, you go back to like the original Star Trek, for example, and you can feel how it's got this pace, you know, where it was made in the 1960s or what have you, or Hill Street Blues, which it just feels slower as it develops. And this is kind of quick and it flows, and the dialogue is choppy and witty, and I've enjoyed watching it so far. What about you?
Yeah, I frankly have loved it through the first few episodes. I think about it in terms of sort of that context you were saying. What I remember from that time frame, what I remember about shows like Hill Street Blues, St. Elsewhere, Law and Order premiered September of 1990, and even that show was in the same vein, but you know, a case of the week. Sometimes if we don't have enough, we got to sort of kind of fill time with stuff so that we can make sure that we time it to exactly 42 minutes. The show cares nothing about that. They want to tell a story, whatever time it takes, whatever we need that's interesting to fill it. I found myself being sort of compelled by maybe even more so the dialogue and the interpersonal relationships between the detectives, even more so than the cases that they're working on, because they've spent time with that, which is interesting. It's something you'd see today, maybe not so much back in the 90s.
Right, indeed. I think Law and Order is an interesting contrast, right? In a couple of ways. One of them is just what you're saying, that Law and Order is very much a case of the week show. And I wouldn't say there's no characterization, like you get to know Lenny Briscoe and things like that. But, you know, like, not really. You don't see him at home.
Yeah.
You know, well, we don't really get into the personal lives of the characters on Law and Order. Indeed.
Would you ever have a 3-episode arc of Law and Order where one of the detectives is agonizing about whether or not to ask the medical examiner on a date? Right. I mean, that's just not something.
Indeed. I mean, I do recall later on. I recall a couple times in Law and Order where they kind of did something like this, and it felt like they were shoehorning something in. So I don't know. I haven't kept up with Law and Order. Maybe they started doing more of this stuff. But we're back to 1993, right?
Yep.
The other thing is, if you watch Law and Order, it, like so many other shows, particularly in this period, that you could point to that are in a similar kind of genre, like, I don't know, Murder, She Wrote, Matlock, Diagnosis Murder, whatever. You know, it's like, pick your murder mystery show. What was the one with there was one with the priest? There are all kinds of, you know, shows like this. My grandma used to watch all of them. I saw Father Dowling.
Oh wow.
They wrap it up
Yeah.
in one episode, right?
Yep.
So basically, Law and Order, the standard structure of Law and Order is it opens with a murder. Lenny Briscoe makes a quip. Dun dun. By the end of the episode, it's been resolved, and like fundamentally nothing carries over.
Right. 2/3 of the way through the episode, the police are going to hand it off to the lawyers, the district attorney's office. They're going to try the case, and there's going to be an outcome. See you next week. I mean, you know exactly the formula.
Right. And like sometimes even maybe on Law and Order, sometimes they don't get a conviction, or sometimes you might not be entirely sure the person they arrested actually did it, but it's resolved, it's over, we move on, right? And one of the things I thought was really interesting is about Homicide is it's not like that, but in the first episode, it kind of is. It's not till the second episode that you get the introduction of the Adina Watson case.
Yes.
And it's almost a surprise that you don't get resolution as that episode ends with Bayless at her funeral and so on. And then now it's sort of at that point becoming clearer that this show is going to be more. It's still an episodic show, but it's more it's serial episodic, I believe would be the term, right? Like,
yeah.
And you start seeing
that there are some elements of episode 1 that are going to, having watched that a little bit, are going to resurface in episodes 4, 5, and 6, and are unrelated to the Adina Watson case. So they're not afraid to sort of go back and revisit, touch on these things, assume you've paid attention, assume you've been following along, and we can reference these things without sort of sacrificing what we're trying to do here with the show.
Yeah. And I think it's a really interesting forum. I actually really love the forum, which really had its heyday, I think, in the mid to late 90s, maybe starting here. Twin Peaks was before this, but Twin Peaks is not really episodic, because what I mean, to be clear, if it's not clear to people by when I say serial episodic, is a show that's structured such that you don't need to have seen every episode. You can just pop in and watch one episode of the show any given week. You've got enough information to enjoy that episode entirely on its own. But then there are some running storylines.
Yeah.
There are through lines. There are connections. But even if you watch the show somewhat irregularly, you can pick up on those enough, right, to not have to see every episode necessarily. But if you are seeing every episode, there's stuff there to work with.
Yes, exactly.
So Twin Peaks wasn't like that because you have to see every episode, right? But other shows, I'm thinking primarily of ones that come a little bit later. Star Trek: The Next Generation was right around this time, but didn't really start doing that stuff until a bit later. Deep Space Nine is probably the more exemplary Star Trek on the kind of serial episodic front. Shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
We moved from, say Buffy to Alias to Lost, and then we're off on the, you've got to be in from day one on these types of shows.
Yeah, I think by the time you get to Lost, you've got to be there from the beginning. You sort of have, it's more of a straight serial, as it were. You have to see every episode.
Yeah.
And in my mind, the way I think about TV history, I feel like that meaningfully started with shows like The Sopranos, which started in 1999. Of course, there were some shows on HBO that were already doing that. It's not TV, it's HBO. But after The Sopranos, it seemed like, okay, well, now this is the thing that everyone wants to mimic. I think part of what enabled that was DVDs.
Yes.
And then streaming. But DVDs first, because apologies if this is like too much of a technical tangent. DVDs are actually really cheap to make in comparison to VHS tapes.
And the model where people forget the Netflix model of just send me a bunch of DVDs. Anytime that you can watch a show and just press next episode, and you don't have to wait to next week, next month, after the summer hiatus. Anytime you can start to do that, then our sort of attention is going towards, we need to have this sort of model. I was listening to some stuff, other people talking about this show. Credit to another podcast called called The Watch, and they were talking about, I mean, this specific issue itself, and they brought up a show called Murder One, which came out in the 90s, which I'd forgotten about, but the premise was we're going to follow one murder case through the whole season, and like how innovative that was. In 2024, that's every show, right? And that,
Right.
presumed innocent, all these things that just come, that's everything, right? So this was sort of the blurring of the lines, Homicide: Life of the Street, going from one to the other.
Yeah, and so it's also interesting, based on a book by David Simon.
Yes.
I know people are familiar with David Simon, the creator of The Wire, for example. Also a writer on this show, not the head writer or anything, he's a staff writer, but it's based on the book he wrote as a journalist, right? Yep. So this is like a nonfiction book, right? Exactly. David Simon kind of embedding himself with the police in Baltimore, and writing this book, Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets. And then apparently, my understanding is he approached Barry Levinson, whatever the details are, about the idea of adapting him to a film. Barry Levinson said this would be better as a TV series, and then, dominoes fall, and we end up with Homicide: Life on the Streets. David Simon is involved, consulting, producing, becomes a staff writer, and so on. And then, not too long after this show ends, makes The Wire. I mean, I don't remember what year The Wire started, but it was
I don't recall
what
year it started, but it was. I mean, The Wire obviously famously, about Baltimore and crime and sort of that same world. So certainly something that David Simon is familiar with. But you're right, it all started with this book that I think it was published in 1991, and then we've got 15 years of his sort of content off of this that begin from that.
Yeah, and there are connections between The Wire and this book that he wrote. Also, you can look in the details if you're curious about such things. We've got at least one main character in Homicide: Life on the Street who shows up in The Wire. This would be the actor Clark Johnson. I think he's only in season 5 of The Wire.
Oh yeah, that may be true. I've not, as you know, I've not seen all of The Wire yet, so comment on the later seasons. But I do know there was some bleeding over, and it wasn't the only case of some bleeding over between the show and other properties in the future, right?
Oh yeah, you want to talk about Monk?
Yeah, why not?
So is this the same Monk who's in Law and Order SVU? Wikipedia says yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of I think verification that his role here, I think, flows into the Law and Order SVU munch that we see, and then he's also appeared in other sort of sporadic episodes of different shows that existed on different properties that managed by some of these creators, producers, writers.
Yeah, like he pops up in The Wire, pops up in an episode of the X-Files.
Yeah,
pops up on I didn't copy the whole list. It did like a couple animated series where he's playing a detective munch. That strains continuity for sure. And that's still kind of the question I have a little bit, where it's really kind of interesting to me that Richard Belzer, he's just spending his whole career playing this one character.
He was a comedian. And took this role and has been in this role for now 33 years.
Yeah, and I think he died relatively recently, didn't he? Richard Belzer?
Did he? I did not realize.
I meant to double check this before we got on the air. Apologies, I'll do it now.
February 2023. Yep.
Yeah, R.I.P. man, the legend, 78 years old. But yeah, this plays Detective John Munch. It's still, what I was going to say is, it's still a little bit of a question in my mind of, does all the narrative continuity really match up? I have the feeling that maybe they didn't care too much about that.
People just liked his character, so they wanted him everywhere.
Yeah, but probably. And I don't recall this, but probably when he shows up in Law and Order, they make some mention about how he used to work in Baltimore.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of interesting to think about. If we do consider the character of John Munch in that vein, we see a younger and perhaps more vulnerable version of who later becomes a very hard, cynical detective.
Yeah. Well, that's something I wanted to talk about, which was I saw a reviewer describe these detectives as sort of something that embody. I think his quote was bleak realism. This idea that we often depict detectives as, the gumshoe, the hero, the guy who figures it out, the guy who saves the day, all this stuff. This is a very much, at least through 3 or 4 episodes, very much a I don't not a nihilistic look at sort of what's happening in their world, but it's not all going to turn out great at the end, right?
Yeah.
And it's just interesting and refreshing to see. I think it's more common today, but it probably was very refreshing to see something like that back in the 90s when it was all a hero's journey story from start to finish.
Oh no, absolutely. And I read something where David Simon even said about his book that his goal involved that kind of
Yeah.
de-romanticizing or their demythologizing
Yeah.
of police detectives, where you have all these stories where it's um, Rockford Files, or I mean, actually, that one's a little bit dark, but anyway, even if there's darkness,
Yeah.
to the character, it's still like the detective is this heroic figure who
Yeah.
solves every murder, and like
They're not Dick Tracy everywhere. That's the
right, like you don't end up with like episodes of Magnum PI where he doesn't figure it out,
right.
you know.
Right.
And so I do think going back to the history of television, this is a significant shift. Like
Hmm.
you could really argue and maybe be correct. This is the first show that did this.
Yeah.
And it's not that the part I think is interesting is that it's not unsympathetic to the police detectives.
Right.
And it's also not like the cops are anti-heroes or something. This isn't like the
Right.
Shield,
Yeah.
for example.
They're not morality lines being blurred yet that we've
Yeah,
seen.
maybe there will be later, but it feels like bleak realism, sure, but it feels like the attempt is to get at a realistic kind of portrayal
Yes. Very
of
much so.
what it's like working as a homicide detective, which ultimately does bring with it a certain desensitization to death, to murder. It's just
Yeah.
happening all the time. It's your job. You see it, you know. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting on that front for sure.
Yeah, I do too. I think that as much as they focus on sort of the balance between the cases and the reaction of the detectives to the cases, there's just sense of, yeah, this is it's almost trite to say, but yeah, this is my job. And this, as you comment on, this is what I see every day. This is what I do every day. Um, we'll talk a little bit about episode 3 in a bit, which is like, well, we're here and no one's called in a murder. So, guess it's kind of a boring day on the job. It's just a sense of it's just something we do and not a glorification of any of that.
Right. And then the entry point is a little bit of the trope, as it were, of the rookie detective coming to join the unit,
Hmm.
and yeah, I think that's working, but
Yeah.
you do get that dynamic. There is a certain extent where it just seems like Bayless does want to be the hero detective who gets justice for the young girl and solves every
Yeah.
murder. And in the background is the reality of the fact that you have that board, for example,
Hmm.
which I was reading was a real thing. And
Yeah.
then because of the show, the Baltimore PD stopped using the board because they thought it was like bad PR. And then more time went on, and the detectives made them bring it back because they missed it. That was kind of funny. Like, well, we used the board. The board's useful,
Yeah, really.
but symbolically, if you look at the board, it's color coded. You know,
Yes.
well, what cases are closed, what's resolved, what have we solved, what haven't we solved, and a lot of unsolved cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the reality of it.
It is a reality, and yeah, just as a show that tried to portray reality, does that, and I think in a maybe too well, and that it made them get rid of that mechanism they were using. That's an interesting story.
Yeah, it's also interesting. I was thinking about how was like, man, are there really this many murders in
Yeah.
Baltimore? And it is maybe worth noting as a brief aside that the murder rate has gone down over the past
Yes.
30 years, broadly speaking. Um, including in places like Baltimore and in New York
Mhm.
City. And um, anyhow, a lot of murders. But
Yeah.
again, it's based on David Simon's book. You look at the number of
Yeah.
murders
Well, we'd
that
be
occurred when he was on the beat.
we'd be remiss if we didn't say something about. So this was meant to be and is a very strong ensemble cast, but pretty quickly, Andre Brower as Detective Frank Pimbleton sort of rose above the rest. I mean, by the first few episodes, you can tell. I mean, this guy is throwing a million miles an hour and is just absolutely, just stands above this group and really became Andre Brower's breakthrough performance. Again, another one who recently passed.
Yeah,
But he's just fantastic in this show.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And his character Pembleton is, I mean, Pembleton is sort of set up that way, but then um Andre Brower's performance lives up to the hype,
Yes.
basically. And maybe exceeds it. Yeah, he's great. I enjoyed how in episode 3 the lieutenant keeps telling him to take off his tie because it's so hot. He does not ever take off his tie. Um, Lots of little things like that. All the characters I've enjoyed so far,
Yeah.
but yeah, we definitely need to shout out Andre Brower here
Yeah.
and just fantastic work.
And shout out to Daniel Baldwin too, and an underappreciated Baldwin brother.
Yeah, as
Lost,
one of the
lost in
lesser
time. Yeah.
Baldwins. I'm not sure what all involved with it. I did wonder. I mentioned this briefly. I wasn't sure if I would, as it turned out. I put it in our notes. I don't know if you recognize the patrol officer named Chris like I did.
Ooh, I can't say I picked up on it.
That's fine. It was one of those things where it's like, where did I know that guy from? You know, and I really wasn't sure where I knew that guy from. And he's been in a whole bunch of stuff over the years. The
Yeah.
actor's name's Lee Turgeson, and he's usually not a main character, with one exception, one big notable exception in my mind, which is the HBO series Oz.
Okay. Okay. That's right. That's right. I've not seen Oz, but we did reference that not long ago. Yeah.
That show is a hard watch.
Yeah. That's what I've heard.
I mean, it's good, but it's kind of tough to get there. People don't know Oz is all. It's based in prison, and I think it's intentionally,
Yeah.
you know, hard, difficult, dark.
Yeah.
Predates The Sopranos. It's one of these shows that
Yes.
they're had on in the mid 90s. So anyway, that's where I recognized it from. And I go, oh no, they're making me think about Oz.
Well,
Um,
let's also make sure before we close, we talk about this episode 3
yeah,
situation. If you pull up your Peacock and even apparently if you buy the DVDs or however you choose to watch this show now, you will see the episodes in the order that the creators, writers of this show intended for it to be. However, episode 3, which I believe is called Night of the Dead Living, um, was back in 1993 removed from the third episode spot and stuck at the end of the season, which
yeah.
makes it completely out of order, out of timeline, out of chronology, because the executives at NBC and all their brilliance decided that as they're trying to gain viewers, this was not exciting enough, right? This is a bottle episode where they're stuck in the police station. It's too hot. They're talking about the cases, they're talking about their personal lives, but nothing really happens. And so in 1993, it's moved to the end. You have more stuff about the cases and what became the aired episode 3. Now it's in the right order when you go and watch it on your streaming device.
Right, and apparently this is not the only time this happens in the series, and there are other instances further down the line that are maybe even more significant.
Okay.
But episode 3, this is why, has a title card at the beginning that's like one hot night in September or
Yeah.
whatever, because they shoved it to the end of the season. And this is episode 3 is, in the classical sense of the term, a bottle episode.
Right.
You never leave the precinct.
Right.
using existing sets, existing cast, you know, and this is often done for budgetary reasons and so on and so forth. I have some more to say about the scheduling thing, but in the middle here, almost, I feel like I should ask, how did you like episode 3?
I actually enjoy these types of episodes. I think if they had fed it to us with it at the end, I'd have been completely
It would
confused.
make no sense whatsoever.
What's going on
I
here?
absolutely agree.
But I don't mind this sort of level of, you know, to use your word, characterization and depth into who we are, who we're dealing with. And there's some discussion about the cases that are ongoing, but really to find out who these people are as we're just getting started with it. I haven't minded at all.
I maybe did a little bit. I'm not saying it was bad.
Yeah.
But the fact that I think it was about 10 minutes into the episode, I went, oh, this is a bottle episode.
Yeah.
We are never leaving the hot precinct. And I just was clear, you know, and for the fact that I thought that maybe hugged me up a little bit.
Yeah.
In realizing what they were doing. And then there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of banter. And for some reason in this episode in particular, it was kind of striking me, or some of it was striking me as almost kind of too clever by half.
Yeah. You have to really push the writing staff to you're gonna just sit them inside an open room for 45 straight minutes and talk about things.
Yeah. But at the same time, maybe what I'm saying isn't fair because this is 1993.
Right.
And maybe there, you know, is more novelty to some of this, you know, choppy, witty dialogue that they're doing in this episode in 1993, whereas I'm sitting here in 2024 and it feels like this has been overdone by Aaron Sorkin and Josh Whedon and all these people who are really like coming later in terms of just having a little bit of that feeling like people in real life aren't this witty all the time. Not all the time, you know, just there was a little bit of that. But not a major complaint.
Yeah.
But I guess I wanted to hit on that but first because there is a degree in which it makes sense to me that from the point of view of the TV executives, they thought this episode's too boring.
Yeah.
Like this is episode 3. It's too boring. And we were talking about this a little bit last night, and as I told you, I did put something on Blue Sky. I asked Alan Sepinwall. He responded today.
Oh, good.
For what it's worth, and not a ton more detail than we already have, but I did think it was interesting. Alan Sepinwall said that maybe every time they did this, because there are further instances in the future, it was because of sweeps.
They
didn't want that episode to be the episode that was airing during sweeps. And I don't even know if they still do sweeps.
Yeah, that's a very 1990s thing to worry about.
Right. I presume you know what I'm talking about, but
yes,
I don't even know if some of our younger listeners would know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
there's a week of the year where the measurements and the ratings and the metrics that would all be sort of compiled as to what, you know, who and how many people are watching your show. That would lead towards what type of advertisers you got, what level you could charge for ads, things like that. Yeah. So you put your best stuff during sweeps weeks.
Yeah, that's a pretty good brief explanation for the Zoomers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that was part of it. But then he also said in his brief comment that it became something of a running joke amongst his fans of the show.
Yeah.
That every time that they reschedule an episode, it was bound to become an instant classic.
Well, I thought it funny because one person I read sort of discussing what had happened here is that the first season of this show, the ratings were not great from the beginning to the end. They were not great. It won some awards after the season, so it was saved and people thought so highly of it, even though the viewership wasn't there. But that the executives at NBC decided on whether or not they were going to keep the show based on, let's see what the last few episodes, what the viewers look like in those last few. I was like, and then you didn't think this one was good enough to show at the beginning, so you're going to show it at the end, and then you're going to measure the show whether or not we keep it based on the number of viewers. I mean, that's some backwards way of thinking that who knows if that would be the case today, but just interesting strategy there.
I mean, I can't imagine this being the case today. This feels like entirely a relic of 1990s TV executives and how they operate.
Yeah.
And I mean, because if you move this episode to the end of the season, it's not a season finale. It makes no sense as a season finale whatsoever.
Not at all.
And it gets to how fundamentally they didn't care, and that kind of integrity of the storyline and what's supposed to fit where and what is the season finale. One has to imagine the TV executives still operating with the view that this is television. The whole point is that every episode stands alone. You don't have to watch the whole thing. We can put them in any goddamn order we want to. And that's, you're supposed to make it in a way where that works. And we don't think this episode is good enough for sweeps week. So we're just going to shove it to the end of the season, which I don't know what the date was when it aired or whatever. But they were like, well, we don't care. Not as many people are going to be watching in May. But everything shifted. And I do think that would be in line with some of the shows that we already mentioned. But maybe you got to give a lot of credit, I think, to The Sopranos, although it was on HBO, insofar as after that, you started to see even the networks try to copy that kind of more serial story. I mean, Lost was on ABC.
Exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. I think it's not a coincidence that this ends in 99, which is around the time that these shows like Sopranos is going, Oz is ongoing at that point. Like I said, Alias starts about this time, Lost comes in 2004. So it definitely walked so these other shows could run.
Yeah, for sure. And again, well, I've already made the point about DVDs, but I think it's an important point.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned with Twin Peaks earlier, I'm a huge fan of Twin Peaks and there's a huge cult following. But man, you have to see every episode. And if you were trying to watch the show in 1990, 1991, and then they switch what night it airs and you missed an episode, you're just out of luck.
Yep, too bad.
And that really does start changing with technology moving forward the way it did. So cool. Anything else you want to hit on here in the first few episodes?
I think that's it. I'm definitely going to push through and finish this first season, and maybe even go beyond that. So we can talk about the next season a week from now if you want, or the rest of the season a week from if you want to.
Talk about the rest of season 1 next week. So we'll see how that goes, and take it from there. And we'll have conversations off air about plans beyond next week, I think. But next week we can finish season 1. I want to finish season 1. I want to see also like how much closure we get in the first season. There's a question that I have, so that'll be interesting. And then we'll see whether we go further or shift gears to something else in terms of the podcast. But all right, I hope you all have enjoyed listening. There were hardly even any spoilers in that conversation.
No, not at all.
Someone killed Adina Watts. You don't find out who. Anyhow, hopefully you all have enjoyed listening to the podcast here, and you'll join us again next week. Please do leave a good rating, review, listening on YouTube, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'd appreciate it. Check out TVObscast.com. No articles there on homicide life on the streets as of yet. There are some articles on The Wire.
Yep.
For what it's worth. Follow the site on social media. Look for TV Obsessive. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Looking forward to it. See you next time.